Good morning, students. The next topic that we are going to see today is health, work, and the family. Okay, so here the syllabus does not specify whether it's the relationship between the health worker and the family of the health worker or the health worker and the family of the patient. I guess usually it will be the family and the patient, but anyway, we'll cover both. Okay, the first thing that we'll see is the relationship between the health worker and the family of the health worker. Okay, suppose you are going to be a health worker. So what is the relationship between you and your family, and how your work affects the family? So it says the topic is health work and the family. So when you do health work, how it affects your family? So it is a very apt topic if you consider the present situation of coronavirus. Because all the health workers who are working in medical field are at risk of getting this disease. And how do we deal with this? So that is what we are going to see in this topic: health worker and family of health worker. So the family members of the health worker are at risk of getting any disease. At present, they are at risk of getting coronavirus disease, but it need not be coronavirus. If the health worker is working with patients suffering from HIV, then there is a risk of the health worker getting HIV if they are not careful. Same way, if the health worker is dealing with somebody with tuberculosis, so if the person is not wearing a mask, then they can get tuberculosis. So like this, the health worker is susceptible to get a lot of diseases, and they can spread the disease to their family members. And especially this coronavirus is something that is highly infectious. So a lot of people who suffer from coronavirus, they spread it to their family members also. So the first point that we're going to see is the family of the health worker is at risk of various illnesses, especially diseases like coronavirus, viral diseases, which are spread, highly infectious diseases. So this is the first thing. So the health worker has a responsibility to prevent getting the disease from the patient, and the health worker also has the responsibility of taking care that he or she does not spread it to their family members. So the health worker has to be careful at home as well as at work, so that proper preventive measures are taken. Then the next one is the time of the health worker. Any health worker, they work day and night. It's like one of the professions where you cannot say I am busy or I don't have time for the patient, because patients are the priority. So there is no proper time, especially if a health worker is catering to emergency patients, like for example a cardiac surgeon or an emergency nurse. So they are all working day and night, and anytime they are called during an emergency, they have to go. So the family of the health worker has to adjust to the time of the health worker. Then the stress that the health worker and the family undergoes. For example, during the coronavirus care, the health workers, many of them resign their jobs if they can. If they want to protect their family, some of them resign their jobs. But then that means that they are not professionals, because they are not able to take the risk. But we cannot blame them also. But at the same time, there are millions of health workers who work day and night, and they go through a lot of stress because they are not able to meet their families, they are not able to see their families. And the stress that the health worker undergoes, sometimes it's passed on to the family members also. So the stress is the third thing. So there are three things. One is the chance of infection, the second is the time of the health worker, the third is the stress of the health worker. So these are the three things that we have to remember when we think of the health work and the family of the health worker. Then next we'll see the health work and the family of the patient and how they are involved. In any health care, if anybody gets sick, the family is also involved in the care of the patient, except probably this coronavirus. Here the person who is sick is isolated, and the family is not allowed to take care of the patient. So that is the only difference between coronavirus and other diseases. In any other disease, the family members are allowed to take care. In fact, the family members are encouraged to take care. I'll give you an example of two diseases. One is leprosy, which we see in our hospital. We teach self-care to the patients who suffer from anesthesia of their hands and feet. So we encourage the family members to get involved in the care of the leprosy patient, because that one thing is it will remove the stigma. The second thing is each time the patient need not come to the hospital, but the family member will take care of minor problems. Only major problems they are told to come to the hospital. The next disease is the stroke. When a person gets stroke, they are not able to walk properly and they have to do exercises, especially when they are in the bedridden phase. This is not in the acute phase. Acute phase they are hospitalized, but after they go home, they have to do exercise. So exercise are taught to the family members, and they are told to do the exercises every day, morning, afternoon and night time. This is also applicable in diseases like in children when they suffer from cerebral palsy or mental retardation. Those children also need some exercises and help and learning. So the family members will have to be involved if the child has to learn a lot of things and recover a little bit at least. So the family involvement in the care of the patient is very, very important. But there are some different aspects that you will have to understand. The first thing is, the health worker needs to know which family member is the right person. One patient, if the patient is sick, there are at least 10 to 15 family members, but each time a different family member will come and ask the doctor about the health of the patient. Then it becomes very difficult to explain to each person about the care. So you have to ensure that one primary family member is selected, so that person is told everything about the patient. So what is done about the patient? What are the things that you have to tell about the patient? There are some mandatory points of communication. The first thing is, at the time of admission to the hospital, you tell about the admission process and what the patient has to undergo. Same way, during the discharge, the family member has to be told about the discharge and what they have to do at home and the process of discharge. During the hospital stay, whenever the patient is undergoing any procedure, the procedure has to be explained to the family member and the patient, and consent has to be obtained from the patient and the family member. And then if the patient is getting better or worsening, that has to be reported to the family member. So and finally, if the patient is dying or on death, then any withdrawal of life support has to be told to the family member. So these are important aspects. Other than this, every aspect of day-to-day care also, the doctor or the nurse or any other health professional can tell the patient and the family member. Okay, so who are the health workers who will usually deal with the family members? The first one is the physician or the doctor. So the doctor usually treats the medical condition of the patient. So the treatment and the recommendations, the side effects, and what will happen when the treatment is given, whether the patient will get better, what is the dose, all that the doctor will explain to the patient or the family member or to both of them. The next person involved in the care is the nurse. So usually the nurse carries out the physician's orders, but also monitors the patient during the daytime, nighttime, and make sure that if there is an emergency, then the right health professional is called. So the nurses are the people who stay with the patient and the family members all through the day. So they teach various aspects of the patient care to the family members. Sometimes the nurse involves the family member in the care of the patient. Same way, the nursing assistant provides personal care like bathing, toileting, turning. So these are also taught to the patient, because once the patient is discharged, regular turning of the patient and bathing, feeding, all that the family member has to learn so that they can continue the care at home. So the nursing assistant helps the family member to learn all these things. Same way, the social worker has to explain. The social worker is a person who helps the patient understand the condition, or the family member to understand the condition, and helps them to cope with the disease. So they are usually providing counseling and ensures that the patient is able to get over the disease, or if the patient is dead, then the family members are given counseling and any other help is provided by the social worker. So these are the members of the healthcare team who deal with the family of the patient. In spite of this, there can be some conflicts. Usually the family members are many in number, and they are from different backgrounds. Some of them are educated, some of them are not educated, some of them are having different jobs, and their way of communication is different. So what will happen is, usually the family members are not happy with the explanation given by the hospital staff, and sometimes the hospital staff are upset with the way the family member behaves. So these are some of the conflicts that can happen. The best way in which you can solve the conflict is to explain in a calm way about the patient and the condition. So that will help to solve the conflict. So this is about the health worker and the family relationship, both the patient's family and the health worker's family relationship. So the next topic that we are going to see is the family, marriage and relationship to illness. This we have already seen mainly in the social patterning of health, how the family and the marriage, what is the relationship to illness. So we have studied already that married people are usually healthier than the unmarried people. So we saw why married people are healthy, because the family members are involved in the care of the person who is sick. So if one person, if the husband or wife is sick, then the other person will take care of their health. And how will they take care of their health? They will be able to give medicines on time. They will prevent the person from drinking or having other habits like smoking or getting sick. So they act as a control mechanism, and they prevent the person from getting worse. Also, when the person is already sick, they take care of the individual. So they are involved in the care of the sick person. So that helps the better outcome of the patient. So how do we prioritize healthcare in the family, or priority of healthcare in the family? The family is given more priority. For example, if there is children along with the spouse, then the children also take care of the parents if they are sick. Same way, if the children are sick, then the parents take care of the child. So usually in any family, the father, mother and the children are given priority. The grandparents are given less priority because they are older. So that is something that you have to understand. So usually in any family, the younger the people, the more priority is given. Children are given first priority. Then the adults who are working, who are less than 60, they are given more priority. And the last priority is given to the older people, especially if they are non-earning members of the family. If the family member is earning, that is, they are making money, then they will be able to take care of their health problems. So the financial condition of the family plays a major role in the illness and taking care of the illness. So we already studied in the previous chapters that the marriage is based on the health of the person. So suppose a person is healthy only, they get married. Very sick people, they usually are not able to get married, or their marriage is delayed indefinitely. So healthy people, they get married, and usually in the early phase of their married life, they are not sick. So usually youngsters less than 40, 45, 50, they do not get sick often. So as the person gets older, they become sick and they have to take care of the family. The other way in which the family ensures that the person is healthy is because usually they have a income. So if two people are working, then they have double income. So if two people's income is there, their lifestyle is better. even if they are mildly sick, they are able to go to the hospital and take proper treatment. So that is another factor that plays a role in the family and its relationship to illness. So even if one person is not earning, the other person provides for the medical care of the patient. So finally, marriage provides a emotionally fulfilling intimate relationship. So whenever a couple are married, they have a good relationship, and that helps them to be healthy. So the chances of sickness itself is reduced, and even if they get sick, they are able to go and get treatment immediately. So that is the relationship between family, marriage and illness. Okay, so as I explained in the first paragraph, marriage also helps in taking preventive care. So for example, if a husband and wife is there, the husband is drinking, or if the husband is having headache, or if the husband is having fever, then what does the wife do? She first provides care at the home, gives amurtanjan or metacin, and sees if the husband is getting better. The husband is not getting better, then she makes sure that she takes the husband to the hospital. The same thing happens if the wife is sick. So like that, the husband and wife help each other. Or if the husband and wife are a little older, the children make sure that the parents go to the hospital and get good care. So that is the other aspect of family and illness. So let's see the effect of family on the mental aspect. You know, if a couple are happily married, then they have good happy married life, and their chances of illness is also less because their mind is happy. Most of the diseases are related to the stress and the happiness levels of the person. So if the couple is happy, then the chances of getting sick because of psychosomatic diseases is very less. Because of germ theory, they may get sick. Because of the actual disease like caused by virus or bacteria, they may get sick, but they will not get any psychosomatic diseases. But on the other hand, if the couple are not happy in their marriage, and especially if the couple are divorced, then the family will be going through a tough time, and there is a higher risk of illness in the family. And usually it is mental illness like depression, anxiety. These are the common problems that may have, and they may also have other diseases which are related to the psychological problems like body ache, headache, migraine. So these are diseases that are common which occur in people who are not happy. So that is how the health of a family member is affected when in a family. Like if the family is happy and if the family is having enough income, then the chances of illness is less, and even if they are ill, they are able to take care of the illness. But at the same time, if the family is broken, then chances of diseases is more. Okay, so the next topic that we are going to study in this chapter is the professionalization of the physician, and also professional socialization of the physician. So these are very related to each other. First we'll see what is professionalization of the physician. So it's a simple term. We all know what is a profession. Profession is a job or an occupation. So a profession of a physician is a very high job. For example, in India we consider physicians to be like gods. Okay, it is not prevalent in Western culture, but even there doctors are considered to be a good profession. So the autonomy of the profession in physicians is very high. Autonomy means freedom. So they are considered to be the people who can make decisions about the treatment of a patient. So professionalization means a person who has achieved the status of a profession, especially in the medical field. So a person who has achieved or completed a course. When you are in 12th standard, you cannot be considered as a professional. Even when you are in college, medical college or paramedical college, you cannot be considered to be a professional. But when you have achieved the status of completing the education, then you are considered to be a professional person. Okay, so that is the professionalization and they have achieved the status of a profession. This has been told by Talcott Parsons. Parsons is a person who has written about uh, the doctor-patient relationship and the sick role. This you will study in the third year. Anyway, first year you would have studied about Talcott Parsons. He has done a lot of work on the medical professional role. So he has said that the medical professional, a doctor, is like a social control agent. So if a person is sick or not sick, that is determined by the doctor. You cannot, as a normal person, we cannot say that we are sick. Only if the doctor examines us and tells that we are sick, then we are sick. Why he tells this is because there are some people in the society who act as if they are sick so that they don't need to do their work. Means not just the regular work in their profession, but even in the home. For example, suppose your mother tells you to go and buy vegetables from the shop, and if you say no, I have a headache, so I'm going to sleep, and if you do not have a headache, then that is deviance from the normal behavior. Normally a child has to help the mother to go and buy vegetables. So if the child says I have a headache, I am not going, that is what Talcott Parsons says is deviant behavior. So who has the authority to decide whether a child has headache or not? The doctor has the authority. So if the mother tells, oh, do you have headache, come, I'll take you to the doctor, and then the doctor examines the child and says this child is cheating, he doesn't have a headache, then that is the work of the doctor. So he is able to control the society by deciding who is sick and who is not sick. Hope you understood this. This is something which you will study again in third year. So the doctor is the one who decides whether a person is sick or not sick, and that is because of his professional authority. He has studied his course and he has the ability to diagnose a person whether they are sick or not, and that decides whether the person is sick or not. So this is how professionals will behave. So Talcott Parsons says doctors are professionals and they regulate the patient's sickness, but at the same time there are some doctors who, using their authority, they will try to make money in a wrong way. Like they will say the patient is sick, so you give me money to cure you of the disease. So this kind of doctors have to be corrected by the other doctors in the profession. So this is how Talcott Parsons said. The other thing is doctors are generally given high rewards. That is, they are given a lot of money by the hospitals or by the patients to get treated. So when they get more money, they do not feel that they have to tell wrong things to the patient. So generally, if you see 5 patients, a doctor will be able to earn a lot of money. So when he earns a lot of money, he does not need to cheat other patients. So that is the thing that Talcott Parsons said. He says, in exchange of the doctor's advice to the patient or even other professionals, it need not be doctors, it could be nurses, it could be physiotherapists, it could be social workers, they are all given high rewards. The reward is financial reward, that is, the patient gives money for the doctor for curing him, and also they give rewards like what do you say, it's like maryade. So that is another reward, that is, they are given a lot of respect which the patient gives. So because of these two reasons, the doctor or the other health professionals have less need to exploit the patient. So because the doctor is able to get a lot of money and respect, they do not cheat the patient. So this is how the doctor as a professional controls the society and helps in treating the patients and behaving as a doctor. So who is a profession? A profession is a person who has completed a particular course. So a doctor as a professional, they are given lot of regard by the society. They are kept in respect, and the doctors are also able to earn a lot of money from patient. So they do not cheat patients. And the doctors also play the role of a social control by finding out who is really sick in the society and who is not sick in the society. So that is professionalization of the physician. So finally, so the next topic which we are going to see today is socialization of the physician. We saw the professionalization of the physician. Next is the socialization of the physician, which can also be called as professional socialization. Okay, so the doctor, see, in these topics we say it's the doctor, but you can, if the question in your exam comes as nurse or social worker or a medical sociologist, you can change the word doctor but use the same answer. Okay, so here it could be socialization of the medical sociologist or socialization of the nurse, or it could be said professional socialization of the nurse or professional socialization of the medical sociologist. So whichever the profession, how do we socialize? So it is a common answer. So professional socialization means there is a social process through which individual students learn to become members of a professional occupation. So we will take your own example. You are all students of medical sociology course. So now you are learning how to become professionals in your occupation. You are not yet professionals, but you are learning to become professionals. So this is the process. So once you complete the process, you will become professionals, and when the process by which you learn is called professional socialization. So right from the day you become a student to become a professional, you start the process of professional socialization. See, you become a professional only after you complete the course, but the process of professional socialization starts the day when you start a professional course. Okay, the first day when you joined Karigiri, you started the process of professional socialization, but you will become a professional only after you complete the course. So hope you understood both the difference. So the process, we will see the second line, the process includes formal and informal methods of learning. Okay, so what is formal methods of learning? Classroom teaching. What is informal methods of learning? When you go to the patient, practically what you learn, that is informal method of learning. Okay, so what do you know? You learn technical things. Technical skills means when you see patients, what you learn, how to talk to the patient, how to give medicine to the patient, all that is technical skill. What you learn in the classroom is knowledge. Through all these notes and classes, what you learn is the knowledge. So you are able to learn skills and knowledge in a college. Together it becomes a professional mode of conduct, how to behave. So when you go and sit with Dr. Philomena in the OPD, and you see how she talks with the patient, or Dr. Ilse or Dr. Shirley, when they talk with patients, you sit with them, you understand how you talk to the patient. So that is how you learn technical skills of professional socialization. So the physician and any other health worker is a professional. It can be a nurse or it can be a medical sociologist, as I said in the beginning. So when you as a professional socialize with other people, it is called professional socialization. So what is socialization actually? In first year you will have learned a big topic on socialization. So we can call that as the primary socialization. So primary socialization is the social process through which children develop an awareness of general social values and norms in the society when they interact with each other. So in any society, when a child talks to the parents, neighbors, friends, schoolmates, teachers, then the child is able to understand how to behave, what is correct behavior, what is wrong behavior, and what is the right way to behave. So that is primary socialization. Same way, when a student in a college, professional college, learns from other students, from faculty, from the principal, from the patient, from the doctors, on how to behave in college and also with patients and in that profession, that is called as professional socialization. Hope you understood the meaning of professional socialization. So if you understood socialization in first year, primary socialization, a child learns how to behave in the society in the way it talks with other people and learns from other people. So that is primary socialization. So same way, a health professional learns from other health professionals, other students, patients, and other people working in the professional area, then that is professional socialization. So it can be learned in two areas. One is the clinical area, that is when the student goes to the patient care area, either it could be the pharmacy or the nursing station, or it could be the doctor's OPD. So that is the main area where they learn professional socialization through clinical experience. The other is classroom learning, which plays a small role because it's more of knowledge. It doesn't teach any skills. So who are the people who socialize during the professional socialization? So this begins on day one of formal education programs and continues till you enter the workforce. That is, right from the day you joined college, you have started to become professional socializers. You've started the process of professional socialization. So who are the people you learn this from? We already saw this, but I'm going through it again. You learn it from your peers. Peers means your classmates and people of the same course. Then you learn it from your instructors and preceptors, that is people who are your seniors and also your teachers, and mentors. If you have any person who is mentoring you, then they are also people who teach you this. But you also learn professional socialization from patients and their families, because you learn how to talk with patients, you learn how to talk with patients' family members. So that is also part of professional socialization. And this socialization is through a process of both formal and informal process. And formal process is the educational program, that is classroom teaching, and informal process is through systematic deliberate block building, which happens in the clinical area, usually in the patient care area, OPDs, or inpatient areas. That is where you learn how to behave with different kinds of patient in different settings. Finally, how you learn professional behavior and professional socialization in the clinical area. So clinical area or the OPD and the inpatient area is very, very important for any health professional to learn about patient behavior and how to interact with the patient. So only when you talk to the patient and when you learn how to talk with the patient can you become a full professional. Without learning how to talk to patients and without, see, a child, how does the child learn how to behave in society? By talking with seniors, by being in different areas. Just if you put the child in a classroom, will the child learn will the child learn everything? No. The child has to go to the field, the child has to go to laboratory, the child has to talk with different people. So that is when the child will learn socialization. Same way, a professional, a medical person, a doctor or a nurse or a physiotherapist or a medical sociologist, all of them will learn this professional socialization, one from the classroom teaching from the teachers, and also in the clinical area from the patient relatives, and also from other doctors and other professionals. So each of them, the way they behave with the patient, the student will learn professional socialization. So professional socialization is a process that is highly influenced by interaction with the classmates, teachers, seniors, and other faculty. Okay, so finally, as we end this topic on professional socialization, you need to know what is professional identity and professional values. See, professional identity is a form of social identity by which members of a profession are categorized and they differentiate from other professions. So, a nurse is a professional identity. She differentiates herself from other professions like doctors, physiotherapists by saying that I am a nurse, I do this work. Same way, a doctor is a professional identity. They have a particular work and how they do. So, that is their professional identity. Same way, medical sociologist, you know what work you have to do. You have to do research, you have to learn about the social model of health theory and apply it in the medical field. So a doctor and the nurse, usually they follow the biomedical theory of health. So a medical sociologist follows the social model of health theory. So you know how you are different from the doctors and nurses, and that is your professional identity. Finally, the most important thing in professional socialization is the professional values. See, for example, what is the value of a thief? He steals money and things. Okay, so if a doctor steals money, will they call him a doctor or a thief? They will call him a thief. So your behavior, how you behave with the patients and with your colleagues, whether you behave in a good way and the right way, that is the professional value that you have. So the behavior of a professional with patients and with other colleagues, that is the professional values. If you behave in a wrong way, then you will not be called a professional, but they will have other names for you. But if you behave as a professional with all people around you, then that talks about your professional values and even ethics. So with that, we have completed this topic. Thank you. See you in the next class.